Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to get into something I think is pretty important and honestly kind of scary. The whole intersection of AI and climate change and how that ties into, you know, global power dynamics.
Yeah, it's a big one for sure. It feels like these are some of the biggest forces shaping the world right now, and how they all play together. Well, it's not always pretty.
Definitely not. I mean, we've been digging into a bunch of different sources for this one, YouTube interviews with experts, some of the
Yeah.
usual podcasting advice, and a lot of research on climate solutions, and it's a lot to unpack. But that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
See if we can make sense of this crazy puzzle.
Absolutely. And the core question we're wrestling with here is, can AI really be a solution for climate change? Or is it just going to end up as another tool for, the people in power to exploit the planet even more?
Yeah, because on the one hand, you hear so much hype about AI being like our savior, like
Yeah.
in that YouTube interview Schmachtenberger did tackling climate change with machine learning. They were talking about how AI can model ice cap melts way more accurately or even optimize geoengineering techniques and help us allocate resources better.
Yeah, there's a ton of optimism around AI in the energy sector too. Like, if you spend any time online in those energy discussions, it's like people are convinced technology will solve everything. Like, they can just breathe a sigh of relief.
Okay, but wouldn't making things more efficient with AI, like, automatically reduce our impact on the environment?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. We have to think about this thing called the Jevons paradox. It's this idea that when you make something more efficient, people often end up using it more. So you can actually end up canceling out any of the environmental benefits you might have gained.
Wait, so you're saying even if AI helps us use energy more efficiently, it could actually lead to more consumption?
Exactly. Imagine electric car batteries get super efficient because of AI. Sounds awesome at first, right? But then suddenly SUVs are way cheaper to run, so everyone wants one. So now you need to mine even more lithium for those batteries, which means more environmental damage. That's the Jevons paradox in action.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. So even with good intentions, we could still mess things up.
Yeah, it's a real concern. We have to remember that AI is being developed and used within a system that really prioritizes profit and expansion above all else.
That reminds me of something else Schmachtenberger talked about, the crazy energy demands of AI itself. It's like we're creating this energy monster.
Right. And that Bloomberg analysis he mentioned really drives that point home. Like, data centers are already putting a huge strain on our electricity grids. And in Virginia, they're actually having to build new power plants just to keep up with the demand from data centers. And some of them are even nuclear plants, which of course comes with its own set of problems.
It's kind of ironic, right? Trying to solve an energy crisis by making technology that needs even more energy. And it's not just small companies either. And even a company like Microsoft, with all their sustainability initiatives, is struggling to keep up with AI's energy demands. It makes you wonder.
It's a huge challenge. And it's not just about the energy AI uses directly. We also have to consider the resources needed to build these systems. All the rare earth metals, the water used for cooling, the entire supply chain has a huge environmental impact.
So even if we forget about the direct energy use for a second, there's this other scary thought. Could AI actually speed up resource extraction and pollution?
It's a definite possibility. AI has the potential to make extractive industries like mining and oil drilling so efficient that they could access resources that were previously too expensive or difficult to get to, and that could lead to a whole new wave of environmental damage.
So it's like the Jevons paradox all over again, right?
Yeah.
We make these polluting industries more efficient, but then they just extract and pollute even more.
It's a scary thought. Think about those forever chemicals, PFOS. They're already a huge problem, and the cleanup costs are estimated to be more than the global GDP. Now imagine if AI makes the production and use of PFOS even more efficient. We could be creating a problem way faster than we can even imagine cleaning it up.
It feels like we're stuck in this system that can't help but destroy the planet. It's like what Schmachtenberger called that superorganism or Moloch. This system that just wants to maximize returns on power and seems to be driving everything.
Yeah, and the market is at the heart of that superorganism. It's this constant force that pushes for endless growth and profit and often doesn't care about the consequences. So as long as AI is being developed by corporations that answer to that market, it's likely to just speed up the process of turning our planet into capital.
It's kind of a terrifying thought that this system, which is so powerful and efficient, is completely blind to the damage it's causing. And it seems like AI, at least in its current form, is really deeply entrenched in that system.
Exactly. And that brings us to what might be the most unsettling aspect of AI, its potential for ubiquitous technological surveillance.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Correct.
We're surrounded by devices that are constantly collecting data, Our phones, our smart homes, our cars. It's like we're building the foundation for a surveillance state without even realizing it.
And AI can take that surveillance to a whole new level. Think about it. AI can use things like Wi-Fi signals and satellite imagery to monitor us in ways we can't even grasp.
So it's not just about governments spying on their citizens. Corporations could track our every move, predict what we want, and manipulate our behavior in ways we haven't even thought of.
There's this company called Anduril, and they're actually developing AI-powered drones and weapon systems that can do real-time satellite surveillance. If you want to hear more about that, you can check out the Peter McCormack podcast interview with Mauricio di Bartolomeo. $100K, Bitcoin, free speech, immigration, populism. It's a wild conversation.
It's not hard to imagine a future where the whole planet is under constant surveillance by these AI systems with no space for privacy or dissent. It's starting to feel like something out of Orwell, you know?
It really does. And think about what that means for environmental activism. Imagine AI-powered surveillance being used to target and silence the people who are speaking out against the industries that are causing climate change.
That's a scary thought. The very technology that we're hoping will help solve climate change could be used to silence the people who are fighting for a sustainable future.
It's definitely something to think about, and it highlights why just relying on technology to fix things isn't enough.
Yeah.
We need a much bigger shift in our values, our legal systems, and our economic incentives if we really want to address this climate crisis effectively.
It's like what Schmachtenberger and Hagens were talking about in that conversation we mentioned. Even the most brilliant technological solutions won't work if we don't also change our social structures and cultural values.
It's like trying to fix a broken leg with a Band-Aid. We need to treat the root of the problem, and that means looking at our systems of power, our values, and our relationship with nature. It's a huge challenge, but it's one we can't ignore.
So where do we even go from here? If technology alone isn't the answer, what can we actually do?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll keep exploring as we continue this deep dive. I think it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all this, you know? We're talking about these massive forces like global systems, powerful corporations, technologies that are changing faster than we can even keep up with. It makes you wonder if there's anything you can actually do about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you hear about these like AI-powered dystopias, it's easy to feel like your own actions don't really matter.
But that's exactly the kind of thinking we need to avoid, because every choice you make, every action you take has an impact on these systems. It's not about like single-handedly changing the world overnight, but it is about contributing to a collective shift in how we think about things.
Right. Schmachtenberger talks about that too, right? Even though we might feel like tiny little bugs up against these huge systems, our collective actions can actually make a difference.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If enough people start demanding change, like supporting businesses that are sustainable, pushing for responsible development of AI, advocating for policies that actually put the planet first, well, we can start to create a force that pushes back against those destructive forces we've been talking about.
Kind of like that butterfly effect thing, right?
All
A
right.
small action can have massive consequences, especially when other people are doing similar things.
And that brings us back to that podcasting advice we mentioned earlier. Just by having these conversations, by sharing this information, we're helping to raise awareness. We're planting seeds of doubt in the minds of people who just assume that technology will save us without any effort from us.
That's a really good point. It's about giving people the tools to ask tough questions, challenge the way things are, and demand better from the systems that shape our lives.
It's not about giving up, it's about taking action. It's about realizing that we're not just passive consumers of technology. We can actually be active in shaping how it's developed and how it impacts the world.
So it's not all doom and gloom then, right? There are things we can do. Are there any real-world examples of how people are making a difference in this area?
Absolutely. Think about Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, he's definitely pushing the boundaries when it comes to electric vehicles and renewable energy.
Right, and then you have people like Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert who are pushing for Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador, which has the potential to really disrupt traditional financial systems.
Exactly. And we can't forget about all the activists, researchers, and everyday people who are raising awareness about climate change, promoting sustainable practices, and holding those in power accountable.
It's inspiring to hear about people taking action. But for someone who's just starting to learn about all of this, it can be hard to know where to even begin. What would you say to them?
I'd say the first step is just becoming informed, like you're doing right now. Then it's about thinking critically and figuring out what actions you can personally take. Maybe it's supporting organizations that are working towards a sustainable future, or advocating for policies that protect the planet, or even just making conscious choices in your own life that reflect your values.
I think a lot of people get overwhelmed because they think they have to solve everything all at once.
That's so true. That's where it's important to remember this is a marathon, not a sprint. Changing our cultural values, our economic systems, our relationship with nature, it's a long-term commitment.
But it's commitment worth making because the alternative is pretty bleak, right? A future where AI is used to just speed up the destruction of our planet, silence anyone who speaks out, and concentrate even more power in the hands of a few.
Exactly. But even with all that, there are still reasons to be hopeful. One of those is the decentralized nature of some technologies like Bitcoin.
Bartolomeo talked about that in the McCormack podcast, right?
Right.
How Bitcoin, being a decentralized digital currency, operates outside the control of governments and central banks.
Yes. It's a system built on consensus transparency and individual empowerment. Now, Bitcoin itself isn't going to magically solve climate change, but it does represent a potential alternative to those centralized systems that have caused so many of our problems. It could be a tool for building systems that are more resilient, equitable, and sustainable.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that the same technology that could power those scary AI surveillance systems could also give people the power to resist those systems. It really shows that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
It all comes down to our intentions, our values, and whether we're willing to challenge the systems that are pushing us towards a dystopian future. Which brings us back to that core question of our deep dive. Can AI really be a solution to climate change?
Yeah, after all this discussion, it feels like the answer is way more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Definitely. As we've seen, it depends entirely on how AI is developed, how it's used, and what values are driving its creation.
Like, if AI just becomes another weapon for the powerful, then it's just going to make those trends we've been talking about even worse. More consumption, more environmental damage, and less freedom for everyone.
But if we can use AI for good, if it's used to empower communities, promote sustainable practices, and challenge harmful systems, then it could actually be a force for positive change.
So really, it's not about AI itself. It's about us, right? We have the power to shape the future, and the choices we make today will determine the world we leave behind.
Absolutely. And that brings up another really important point.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential downsides, but we've also seen how people are using AI for good things.
Yeah.
Like optimizing renewable energy or holding corporations accountable. It really shows how technology can be a double-edged sword.
It really does. Yeah, it can amplify our intentions, both the good and the bad, which is why it's so important to not just blindly trust technology. We need to be critical, demand transparency, and make sure that AI development is guided by ethics that put people and the planet first.
So if you had to give our listeners just one key takeaway from this whole deep dive, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think it would be, don't fall into the trap of thinking that technology alone will save us. AI is powerful, no doubt, but it's not magic. To really tackle climate change, we need a fundamental shift in our values, our systems, and our relationship with the natural world. AI can be a part of that, but only if we actively shape it and make sure it aligns with our values.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it actually brings up a thought that's been kind of bugging me this whole time. What if the real power of AI isn't just in solving problems, but in changing the very nature of the problems we face?
Wow, that's a really interesting point. What if AI doesn't just speed up or slow down existing trends, but actually changes the entire landscape of human civilization? Like reshaping our economies, our societies, even our understanding of what it means to be human.
It makes you realize that we've mostly been focusing on the short-term effects of AI, but the long-term consequences are way harder to predict and could be even more impactful. We're basically entering uncharted territory here, and the choices we make now will determine what our future looks like.
It's true. So as we wrap up here, I want you to remember this. AI isn't just a tool, it's a mirror. It reflects our hopes, our fears, and our values. The future of AI is the future we choose to create.
That's a powerful thought and a great place to leave it, I think. Thanks for diving into this with me. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.